On today's episode of the Black Studies Podcast, we have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Keith Holmes, researcher, historian, author, and founder of Global Black Inventor Research Projects. Mr. Holmes has spent over 30 years researching innovations, inventions, and patents by Black innovators and inventors. Researching these innovators through the New York Patent Library, the Schomburg Library, Howard University's Moorland-Spingarn Research Center, among other places, Mr. Holmes has picked up the baton from Henry E. Baker and compiled a growing list of over 20,000 innovations, inventions, and trademarks by Black men and women from over 80 countries and 5 continents. He has lectured in Antigua, Barbados, California, Canada, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. He has also done virtual lectures in Los Angeles, Maryland, Tallahassee, Toronto, and London. He is currently working on several projects about Black Inventors. He has been published in BlackHeritageToday.uk, BlackNews.com, CaribbeanLife.com, AfricanHeraldExpress.com, and BlackStarNews.com, among other publications. In 2022, he was awarded the Honorary Male Champion Award presented by the Global Women Inventors and Innovators Network. Mr. Holmes was born in Queens, New York, and currently lives with his family in Brooklyn. Alrighty, so hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Black Studies Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Keith Holmes, lecturer, author, publisher, and founder and CEO at Global Black Inventor Research Projects. How are you doing today?
I am doing fine, and thank you so much for inviting me on this podcast. I look forward to sharing some great information with your listeners.
Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to our conversation. So we can dive right in. What drew you to work on Black life, both as a writer, but also in terms of founding this company to kind of capture some of the stuff that's happened in terms of Black inventors?
You know, I'm a child of the 60s, even though I was born in 1951, and I participated growing up in a number of different movements, including, the Vietnam protests, as well as racial injustice in the United States, and promoting the idea that Black studies at Rutgers University needed to be a department and not a program. Because as you know, as a program, you can get rid of it any time. But one of the things that really led me to this was in my early childhood, I was always fascinated by science and technology. So all of the sci-fi movies from the 50s to 60s, and then when Star Trek came on television in 1966, I'm kind of telling my age, I was fascinated with the idea of this computers, space travel, and I always thought it was far-fetched, but something drew me to that. And one of the things that I quickly began to realize is that in my early part of my childhood, I actually went to the library and looked up books on inventions. And as you know, back in those days, most of the inventors were not people who looked like you and I. They were either from the United States, Germany, the UK, Canada, other countries, but hardly any mention of Black inventors. So growing up also, during Black History Week, because at one time it was just a week, it wasn't a month, they would only talk about Granville T. Woods or George Washington Carver. So those things always stuck as seeds in my mind, but they were not something that I really wholeheartedly looked at. And in 1988, a big change occurred in my life. I had the opportunity to attend the International African Arts Festival located in Brooklyn, New York at Boys and Girls High. And back in those days, there was a plethora of books, materials, and discussions. But there's one book that really struck my fancy, and that was Black Inventors of America by Burt McKinley. I was so enthralled with this book, I said, you know what? I'm going to become a street vendor. I'm going to sell these books to other people around, the neighborhood. But I spoke to my mentor and spoke to my wife, and they said, why don't you write a book about Black inventors? Now, prior to that, the only thing I had done was love letters, poetry, and some reading. But that idea of writing a book about Black inventors set off an avalanche within my mind and my spirit. And I went down to the Schomburg Library. I went to the Moorland-Spingarn Library in Washington, D.C., and the New York Public Library had a database system that you could look up inventors as well as have books on it. So I started to research. I said, Dad, there's a lot of information about inventors. I had constructed a list of inventors and scientists and engineers. And then I realized I got to kind of form a database in order to keep track of all these inventors that I was finding. I found that Black men and women played a very prevalent role in the building of the atomic bomb. So in the film Oppenheimer, we don't see any Black engineers, scientists, chemists, or mathematicians. But 40 Black men and women received citations from the United States government citing their work on the building of the atomic bomb. And of course, there are other things that Black men and women did during World War II, but the main thing I got out of reading this book was Black Inventors of America was we have played a very prevalent role in science and technology from slavery or enslavement, as we should be saying now, to now. And to the point where there are over 30 Black men and women who've been inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. So and I'm kind of bouncing over, so between research, taking my children to soccer matches, swim matches, music lessons that they had to take, and helping them with their homework, as well as working full time, I started to writing and documenting this information. And one of the unique things about my book, Black Inventors of America, Black Inventors Crafting Over 200 Years of Success, one of the most important things about this book, it documents inventors from not only here in the United States, but in the Caribbean, Canada, the UK, Australia, Africa, of course, Central and South America, as well as Europe. Different approach to this because many of us, when I say many of us, I'm talking about Black and white folks, we believe that inventions just start in European countries or with the Romans or with the Greeks, not Kemet or Egypt as it's called, or Africa or with the Native American population or the Chinese or the Indians in India. Invention is something that's not limited to one race of people or one color. Those ideas flow freely in everyone's mind, and it's up to people to capture that idea and decide that they're going to invent something. So to answer your question really, really well is that what inspired me was I needed to find and document this information. And that information has led to finding over 21,000 inventions by Black men and women from over 70 countries and 5 continents. And let me explain that this is the tip of the iceberg. So that answers how I got involved in this. And we'll proceed on with some different stories of how these inventors have made an impact, not only here in the United States, but globally.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned some of your process in terms of researching these things and some of the different libraries you went to and the creation of the database.
Yes.
So how did that process, how did that influence or translate into how you put together the book and how you brought these ideas or the inventions and the people and the work that you did to the book form?
When I first was thinking about writing this book, and I was really struggling with, well, how do I get this information into a book format? And unfortunately, my wife passed away in 2020, but she was the catalyst for saying to me, you need to get this project done. Now, originally, that book would have been over 1,000 pages long. And I think very few people would wind up reading a book that large, but it would have been filled and chock full of a lot of information. So the segue was, I need to write this book in chapters where we can first talk about the Africans and as well as their influence in the area of science and technology. I have to include the people from Egypt, the Black people from Egypt, who are the founders of mathematics, astrology, building and construction, agricultural, farming, everything that builds a society. I had to realize we've got to start from an area where people can see that from the very beginning, from Egypt to Africa to the transportation of enslaved Africans to the United States and beyond, science and technology has always played a role. So that's the way I did the book. The book has chapters. It talks about the pillars of economy here in the United States. When you talk about sugar, tobacco, cotton, how those products influence the building and making the United States the industrial giant that it is now. But it also breaks down the inventors by country. So we've included the inventors from the United States, the ones from Canada, from the Caribbean. So people could see that, when we talk about inventors, we're not just talking about the Black inventors of the United States. And then I also included the various different industries. When we talk about music, DJ Kool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, these men and women, even though they did not file for patents, their names were trademarked. And as you know, hip hop is now a multi-billion-dollar business industry. It's influenced everywhere over the world. There's no place you can go, especially when you talk about large countries like Brazil, Nigeria, South Africa, UK, France, China, Japan. They're all influenced by hip hop, and hip hop is not something that's, old. It is something relatively new from the 1970s. So that's the way I approach this. Let's do it by chapters so that students and teachers and educators and parents can see that, I cannot just talk about Granville T. Woods, Madam C.J. Walker, or Frederick McKinley Jones. My approach has to be, what did these inventors by these chapters have in common? They're all Black. They are proven without a doubt that science and technology is a thread that is sewn throughout the economy here in the United States and beyond. So that's the approach. I said, well, let me do it by chapters. And like I said, if I had rigidly did the book the way I really wanted to do, it would have been over 1,000 pages long. So the approach was a little different. And just to let you know, my scholarly influence was Burt McKinley as well as Ivan Van Sertima. These men played a very important role in how I approached this. I did not want this book to be just used by educators. I want it to be used in libraries. So case in point, all of the Ivy League schools, except for Brown University, and I'm working on them, have a copy of my book. All the Big Ten, most of the Big Ten schools have a copy of this book. This book is in the national state libraries of New York, Jersey, Mississippi. Mississippi was the first state to actually make my book a part of their state library. Florida, of all places, North Carolina, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Michigan. So this book is not something that's just limited to one area of the country. It is something that could be used throughout the United States as well as abroad.
I think it's interesting the way that you were influenced in how to organize it, such that it was more accessible and able to be consumed by larger populations. And also the intentionality behind ensuring that it was available in libraries, not just something to be used in classrooms or even with universities, but making sure that it was at state libraries and in other locations where anyone can pick it up and learn these things. I think is super important, especially when we're thinking about like the purpose and the roots of Black studies and how it was very much community oriented. It's very much about being accessible and engaged with the people and not set off apart where it can't be accessed or engaged with by larger communities. So that makes a lot of sense, and it definitely fits with the purpose of the field itself, I think. So, what do you see your work as saying about Black life? Like, you've touched on it a little bit, like in terms of demonstrating that Black people the world over have invented things that have been very influential, things that we're still relying on, things that we don't know about, um,
Yeah.
and are not acknowledged. What do you think, or how do you see your book or the cataloging of these things as contributing to how we think about Black life today?
That's a good question. And I like what Sheena Howard said. The influence of the movie Black Panther, which I must have seen like 7 or 8 times. My son must have seen it 10, and he kept saying to me, well, Dad was, I said, okay, if it wasn't that great, why did you see it so many times? I've gone to theaters in Florida where the audience was mainly Hispanic, and they were enthralled with Black Panther. The idea that a civilization, and even though it's fictitious, people were trying to book flights to Wakanda. We've heard that story. People were going like this in the elevator and greeting people on the street and dressing up and being proud of being Black. But the idea of the science and the technology behind Wakanda, I think, caught everyone's interest to the point where young men and women said, you know what? I might not want to be a rap star. I might not want to be a basketball or football player. I might want to be an inventor. So I did a little study. I found that only 1 in 50,000 men will play professional football. Only 1 in a million will achieve the maybe even higher odds now of a LeBron, Kobe Bryant, or any of these great basketball, Michael Jordan. And when we talk about track, field, as well as baseball and soccer, those odds are extremely high. You have to dedicate tens of thousands of hours honing your skill. And the main thing is you got to have that talent. But the research has clearly shown to me that our chances of becoming inventors is about 1 in 3,000 or associated with that. So how I see this is we have to create a new paradigm in our communities. And not only in our communities, also brown people's communities, as well as Asian communities, that we just don't have to be satisfied with being a sports star or an entertainer or a someone who's just taking someone else's job. We can become a creator. And we've seen that with the creation of content on the internet now. I mean, that's innovative, the fact that content is being created digitally that will live on forever. So that's my approach. My approach is I want this to be the seed where young Black men and women, or middle-aged or older men and women, realize they've always had this burden, passion to create something or invent something, and they just didn't have the wherewithal or the idea that they could actually do that. So this purpose of this book is to set that seed in their minds that you can become an inventor. Yes, I wanted to become a basketball player. I'm only 6 foot. I wanted to become a track star, but I didn't have that kind of talent. And no matter how many hours I put into it, and I'm not trying to discourage anyone from pursuing those interests, but we need more books. We need more scholarly books. We need more poems, more songs, and most of all, we need a film. There is no major film about Black inventors. That's got to change. And, for me, that film, Black Panthers 1 and 2, and when 3 comes out, I'll be looking at that too. And I got a chance, just to segue for a second, to see Chadwick Boseman before he passed. I was in a health food store with my wife, and we were shopping. And this is, before it was announced that Chadwick Boseman had cancer. And we both saw him, and I said, honey, don't say nothing, because nobody knows who he is. He's in there shopping. And all I did was go like this. I didn't go like this. I just acknowledged that he was there. And it was wonderful to see him play that role of Black Panther. And I think that for us, and including Malcolm Jamal Warner, I got a chance to meet him. I worked in the satellite communications industry almost 35 years. I got a chance to meet a lot of people in the capacity of what I was doing. I worked for HBO, CBS, some of the major communications companies here in the United States. And I got a chance to meet a number of people. But the idea of what we have to do has to be piggybacked on the idea that inside of us, there is a spark. Some people call it a spark of genius. Some of us call it the spark of our ancestors being with us at all times, influencing us. Some of the decisions that we have to make in life, whether they're good or bad, we're being influenced by a force within inside of us. And this book is to be that generator of that force to say, I can be an inventor. I can be an innovator. I just don't have to be someone who just toes the line.
Thank you. I think that having the information out there, like having the examples, providing the history is, as you said, it's very important for showing that there are alternative paths and for sparking different ideas in people. You got to have an idea to invent something, and being able to kind of see the kinds of ideas that others have come up with before, or the applications of those ideas, maybe even beyond what was initially conceived of, I think is definitely helpful for thinking about those, where we can go moving forward. And yeah, I mean, I also saw Black Panther multiple times.
There you go. Case in point. And it was inspiring. That was the main thing. I think and I can still watch it now and still feel that inspiration that I felt from the first time that I saw the film.
Yeah, I think we just watched it the other week, me and my daughter. And the invention and innovation part of it was so powerful. And even thinking about the Ironheart that just came out, continuing that innovation and creation aspect. I think those are really powerful examples of seeing people that look like us creating things that other people just could, like, it was beyond fathomable for other places and people. The things that were happening in Wakanda, nobody thought of. Like, they didn't think that they were real. So I think that that's the having that there, being able to see it, is definitely a powerful motivator, particularly for young kids who maybe haven't figured out what it is they want to do yet, to be able to have that example.
And I want to cite a couple of examples. The fact that we're doing this voiceover IP, this technology and its use was developed by a Black woman named, Marion Croak. I'm sorry. She was inducted along with Patricia Bath, the first two Black women to be inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. So this idea of us doing this voiceover IP is because of Marion Croak. She has over 200 patents. When we think about getting surgery done on our eyes for glaucoma and various different diseases people have, they use laser technology. It was because of Dr. Patricia Bath that we are able to use that technology. These are women that came up with these ideas of using technology to help mankind. And then we can't forget the fact that every day, and when we use these different devices, we are using computerized systems. So this 1 gigahertz chip that has grown to 10, 15, 16 gigahertz chips, they're able to do business transactions, banking, telecommunications, instant video around the world, is because of a Black man by the name of Mark Edward Dean. These three people were inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame, a prestigious organization. My estimate alone, just with the 30 to 35 Black men and women who are inducted, they're responsible for generating tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars. And then when we look at All of the inventors, over 600 that have been inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame, they're responsible for trillions of dollars around the world. So we've got to look at, there's a money segment to this, as well as prestige, but also helping mankind. And many of these inventions that have been developed by Black men and women, as well as other inventors, have benefited mankind and helped the world globally.
So what do you how do you so you've kind of touched on this, but how do you see this work in relation to the history and future of Black life across the diaspora?
You know, as we move further and further into the 21st century, there are going to be inventions that are going to, quote unquote, blow people's mind. There are two African inventors that developed a device that they can put on someone who's had an arm amputated.
Mm-hmm.
And using the power of thought can move that arm. And we've seen that in some of the sci-fi films. There's a Black woman by the name of Dr. Adia Green who lost two of her custodians in terms of taking care of her when she was young to cancer. And as you know, cancer is something that is a quote-unquote blight to this country as well as around the world. And they're using all kinds of different techniques to fight cancer. She developed nanoparticles that can go into the bloodstream, into the body, destroy the cancer cells, and leave the healthy cells alone. That's all kind of like what Marvel has been about. You know, and I'm a big fan of watching all the Marvel films because they explore this area of science technology, which is on the cutting edge of what's going on. So what I see is that what's going to happen in the future, and I've told my children this, there's going to be a day when there's going to be robots walking down the street doing things just like in the film I, Robot with Will Smith. I like that film. And why? Because as technology grows and as they begin to use iCloud and use these different devices that can benefit mankind, of course, there's the other side where it can be destructive. But my belief is that what's going to happen is there's going to be a time when technology, besides just AI, is going to be the forefront of how people get things done in this world. And when I say we as a people, we're going to be right there in stride with it. So I kind of see that it's important for young people to understand that we're not just talking about the George Washington Carvers, or we're not just talking about the Madam C.J. Walker. We have to make sure we influence our children with the idea of all the new inventors that are coming into play right now. Microsoft has Black inventors, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, IBM. IBM has a plethora of inventors who look like us, not only here in the United States, but in the Caribbean as well as in Africa and Canada. So the change has to be that let's not run away from technology. Let's embrace it. And I think one of the things that we're facing, particularly with books being banned and people being somewhat afraid to come forward and say, you know, that this man or this woman did this or did that, as long as it's factual, and that's one of the things that I approached in my book, I had to verify the name of those men and women that actually did invent something, and I have a patent or a trademark to prove it. Otherwise, we get caught up in this idea that, well, someone invented space travel. Well, let's see what the facts is behind that. Someone developed a nuclear-powered rocket. Let's make sure we have the information behind that. Someone said they found a cure for cancer. Let's verify. And the more we see that we're involved in that everyday process of the things we use, refrigeration, we could not survive in a society without air conditioning and refrigeration. And when we talk about refrigeration, particularly on mobile devices, mobile platforms such as trucks, buses, planes, you got to talk about a man by the name of Frederick McKinley Jones, who only had a 6th grade education. He received the National Medal of Technology in this country back in the 60s. This man only had a sixth grade education, but he invented mobile refrigeration devices that could be mounted on buses, trains, um, airplanes, you name it, anything that requires refrigeration, eggs, flour, fruits and vegetables. All those things require refrigeration. So this man should be elevated in the school system. This is not half truth. This is not fake news. This is real. And when I said, when we talk about this, the idea of COVID vaccine, there's a Black woman that was involved when they did that accelerated process of coming up with a vaccine. Whether you believe COVID is real or not, I took the shot because I did not want to have my life end because of some disease. I was not afraid of getting that shot. But there are men and women who look like us who were involved in that process of coming up with that vaccine. And hopefully, if anything like this occurs in the future, people have to understand this is science. This is not something that's not real. So yeah, it's got to be something that's embedded in our community. So one of the things that we have done, besides my book on Black Inventors crafting over 200 years of success, we also have a poster of Black men and women, scientists, inventors, mathematicians, because the kids today, when they think about or look at some of their heroes and sheroes, they sometimes don't see the inventors or the scientists. They just see, basketball stars, people in the music and entertainment industry. We need to change that narrative. We got to make sure our children see films, read books, or have posters of people who look like them who've been involved in science and technology. Yeah.
So I love the idea of the poster. And that actually ties into what I wanted to ask you next in thinking about how we make this information more well known, right? So particularly for K-12 and for younger students, in what ways, I guess, have you heard of or seen your book or the information in the book about Black inventors being taught and utilized in schools?
Well, I had an interesting conversation with the Department of Education in Florida, with Governor DeSantis, and folks were saying how he wanted to, destroy the idea of Black history being taught in the school system. My book, along with the PowerPoint presentation on Black inventors, was approved by the Department of Education in Florida. I worked with FAMU, Florida A&M, in Florida back in 2021 and 2023. And I did a workshop on that. And that goes to say that as long as the information is factual, as long as people can grasp the idea that science and technology plays a very prevalent role in development of young people's growth, that's where I'm moving my book toward, besides the libraries. It's got to go into the curriculum, colleges, fourth grade through 12 on my book, churches, community centers. That's what's been my focus, as well as working on the advisory board of the Black Inventors Hall of Fame. We're looking to build a museum in West Orange, New Jersey in the next couple of years, which will highlight the inventors of color from not only here in the United States, but in the diaspora. And I'm also working with another young Black man who has a mobile Black Inventors Museum. And I've done 2 book signings with him where he has a mobile museum where people can see some of the inventions developed by Black men and women. So it's got to be something besides being in the curriculum. It's got to be something that people can see, touch, and hear. And this is where, the social media platforms will play a very important role. So it's something that takes time. One of the things that has taught me about being a writer and being a researcher, you have to be patient. This is not a quick starter. This is because we're talking about changing people's perspective that the ideas have been embedded that Black men and women haven't invented anything. Case in point, the father of Black invention research is a man by the name of Henry E. Baker from Columbus, Mississippi. He was enrolled into the U.S. Naval Academy. He went on to become a patent examiner at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And when he wrote letters to newspapers and bulletins around the country, asking if they know of any Negro or colored inventors. Now, this is back in the early 1900s. Sent 2,500 letters out. Received, 1,500 letters back, scoffing, laughing at the idea that Black men and women could invent anything. But he got 1,000 letters back, documenting and proving that Black men and women indeed were inventors from the United States, Canada, and the Caribbean. Henry E. Baker, who's I consider my mentor, even though he's not physically alive anymore, but I could hear his voice leading and helping me in the discovery of some of these inventions that I've been able to find. And Henry E. Baker is, my book is part of the United States Naval Academy. Just to go to show that proof is in the pudding. If you stand by factual information, it can't be disputed. And I look forward to making sure other institutions have a copy of this book and making sure that I can get the opportunity to speak in audiences such as yours with the Black Studies podcast. We need to hear more. We need to see more. Key thing is we can't be afraid of going forward with information that is factual.
So, speaking of going forward, right? What is an issue that you think needs more attention as we move forward, related to Black studies, and whether that's making sure that we have more information about Black inventors and innovation, or finding more of more inventors and innovation that has happened that we haven't yet been able to capture? Where do you think this research and this project should be going moving forward?
Well, it's a great question. I think we just can't approach this from just being, quote unquote, an American problem or a United States problem. It is something that has been plagued around the world. Canada. I got a chance to go to Africa, in Ghana, back in 2022. And it was interesting when I spoke to the lead person who was in charge of our group. He didn't know much information about Black inventors. And I'm talking about African inventors because it's not taught in the school system. So part of this is that Black studies need to be allowed to grow. I mean, right now, I know the Black Studies Department is facing a whole lot of flack from around the country. And we have to make sure that you guys kind of are like the revolutionaries of the 60s and the 70s. You have to continue to stand up and not be afraid of what going forward could mean. So we have to make sure that these books, these curriculum programs that are being developed includes this, because if we just talk about the Carvers, the Woods, the Madam C.J. Walker, there's no inspiration for young people to get involved in science and technology. They've got to know that the inventors are working with Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, NASA. All of the major corporations cannot survive without the innovative genius of Black men and women, as well as the Hispanic population. Case in point, I had an opportunity to speak to the USC Legacy Prep School in California back in May of this year. I looked up the inventions done by Mexicans. You and I, for the most part, have not heard much information about Mexican inventors or Hispanic inventors. So I think what we've got to do as we move forward in this sea of change. And that's what I call it right now. There's a sea of change occurring. There's some people trying to push back and take us back to an era where people believe that Black people just were not a part of science and technology. I think we have to, quote unquote, stand our ground, make sure we push the idea. And sometimes it's not just pushing, it's just making sure that this information is made available because you can't hide things from the internet.
Yeah.
Before it used to say you can hide things from people in a book. Well, you can't hide it because you can research anything on the internet anytime, any day. And I think we have to make sure as parents, as educators, as heads of Black Studies Department, we have a segment that talks about science and technology. Because without science and technology, there's no moving forward for any country or race of people. And we've been involved in the beginning with science and technology in this country and in Africa, of course. Because people believe that people were brought here and didn't have any skill. Well, that's not true. We knew agriculture, herbology. In South Africa alone, they've got over 40,000 plants that have been identified for medicinal purposes. You better believe the pharmaceutical companies are trying to find out from the men and women who are the keepers of the herbal technology in South Africa. We want to know your secrets. We want to know what this plant is good for. Same thing in Australia with the Aborigine people, tea tree and eucalyptus, which has a lot of medicinal properties. The Aborigines knew that already, as well as the Native American people knew about echinacea, which is a herb that could be used for fighting colds and whatnot. They had that information. And of course, what pharmaceuticals and other companies are trying to do is just trying to extract that information from the people and not give them credit for developing this information from generations ago. So yes, moving forward, not be afraid, make sure we are factual. Don't say we did something that is not true because it can be disputed. But main thing is do not be afraid of change. And change is occurring. And as a people, we've known how to survive through changes. Slavery, Jim Crow, segregation. We've gone through it all and we're still standing. And part of the reason why we're still standing is because our ancestors are standing with us. That's that voice sometimes you hear, or I hear, or everybody else. Hey, keep going. That's how we get inspired. Or someone we run into that speaks to us and said, what they had to say to me was really inspirational. And it doesn't matter what form they come in. It could be somebody Black, white, Chinese. It don't matter. They said something to you that was true. And you say to yourself, I got to use that. Or listen to a song, or go see a movie or a play. Something is inspiring us and we need to keep that inspiration going. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to make sure that we get this book out on a number of different platforms into the educational institutions and making sure, young people see that history is not just his story. It's also our story and it's a part of American history. You just can't erase it.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just want people to realize that this book, Black Inventors Crafting Over 200 Years of Success, was born out of, sweat, a lot of research. I lost my wife in 2020, but she was very inspirational, of us raising our 4 children to keep going. And now with my fiance, she's also been that inspiring force not to give up on this dream. So even though I didn't turn out to be a basketball player, track star, I became a writer. And I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of what you're doing, providing a platform with Black Studies Podcast so people can see the many different truths that are in our community. And that's how we're going to grow as a people.
Well, thank you so, so much. I definitely appreciate your time and the work that you have put into this project. I think that, as you said, having especially the contemporary examples is so important. right? Because you're right. I wasn't taught about contemporary Black inventors. I was taught about Madam C.J. Walker and George Washington Carver, which does make it harder for it to connect and feel real when the reality is Black people are inventing things every day. And
Exactly.
we can see that through your book and through the research, the kinds of research that has went into that. So thank you.
You're welcome. And
Okay.
let me know when the recording is finished. I want to say something to you.